you imagine being a woman and joining this and being like, yeah, that sounds about right. Where do I sign? We are going to be diving into the NXIVM cults and Keith Raniere. It kind of marketed to people like you will become like a Gandhi, like an Einstein. You'll be like a genius and be able to really impact the world.
Keith Raniere, when he was 10, Keith got his first taste of blackmail. A girl in his class told him a secret about her sister, and he threatened to tell her family. He said, quote, "You know, it's like I have this little bottle of poison I can hold over your head." And as a young teenager, encouraged by his parents, Keith displayed traits of severe narcissism. He also believed he was a genius who was superior to everyone he knew. And the flames of his ego were further fanned by a seemingly endless line of young girls. Keith was even featured in the 1989 edition of the Guinness Book of World Records for his high IQ, but he took that opportunity to start promoting himself as literally the smartest man in the world. Keith spent most of his career studying the complexities of multi-level marketing and how to attain success in MLMs. He founded two of his own companies. The first was called Consumers Buyline Incorporated, or CBI.
And Consumers Buyline was like a group purchasing thing. So they would get discounts on like appliances or whatever else, and the whole group would get the discount. And so this was an MLM. An MLM is a multi-level marketing company. Essentially, they don't like to call themselves pyramid schemes, but it's a pyramid scheme. The people at the top make the most. They recruit people underneath them to do sales, and they get a percentage of their sales. And the people at the bottom make little to nothing.
So Keith's first MLM gets busted by the New York Attorney General's office. They filed charges against CBI claiming it's an illegal pyramid scheme. And from that point on, he was prohibited from participating in MLMs. But just a year later after all of this, Keith re-enters the MLM game by founding National Health Network, which was another pyramid scheme that got closed down in 1999.
I think that's what life was about for Keith. I think it was about controlling people, being the boss, having people underneath you, people looking up to you.
So in the midst of closing down National Health Network, Keith collaborated with Nancy Salzman, who's a nurse who practiced neurolinguistic programming and hypnotism. And in 1998, the pair of them created the Executive Success Programs, which essentially was laying the foundation for NXIVM. So the Executive Success Programs were marketed as personal development seminars that could help participants find enlightenment and success. He claimed that his methods could abate symptoms of Tourette syndrome and even help kids speak up to 13 languages.
Ridiculous.
He made claims like this, and medical claims. That's definitely the craziest thing. Like, now Nancy Salzman exploited her medical background, while Raniere continued his claims that he was the smartest man in the world to tout executive success programs as a miracle cure for all of life's problems.
These types of groups do help people often, like actual self-help groups and support groups and classes. And there's plenty of stuff like this out there that they kind of disguise themselves as another one of those.
So when Keith and Nancy discovered that these executive success programs were a success, that's when things really took off for them. And that's really when NXIVM got started. The way that he promoted NXIVM to tenants was that it was this profound philosophical movement, and it was led by a class system, and members of varying ranks wore different colored sashes to differentiate their levels of authority. And the mission was based on eliminating all envy-based habits while ethically gaining control over the world's resources and wealth. And during classes, workshops, and seminars, members were indoctrinated. They learned the mission and the philosophies of NXIVM and praised its leaders. And they pay thousands and thousands of dollars to attend these classes, and some of these programs lasted for 16 days straight. But membership in NXIVM was exclusive and by invitation only. So classes and programs that were offered by NXIVM were based on false scientific claims and mostly useless self-help jargon. But they served their purpose in luring in the weak and vulnerable. And once enrolled, a subtle process of brainwashing and hypnosis began to unfold. So the NXIVM classes promoted a kind of emotional dependence through a vicious cycle of insults and praise. Participants would be torn down and berated. Then when they couldn't take it anymore, they'd be showered in compliments and praise. And the result was a deep-rooted craving for emotional high of accolades, which came only after sadistic emotional abuse. I think so many people are like, why wouldn't you just leave? Like, why wouldn't you just, I'm out?
You end up feeling like you can't, like you have no other option, especially when these people have all this dirt on you. A lot of people were saying that they got them to like talk about their families. And they knew that, if they left, that all this could be leaked to their family. And I think that's hard for us to understand, especially when you're not brainwashed and maybe you haven't been in a relationship like that and you don't understand. They know how to rope people in and make them feel like they truly have no other choice.
For example, a former member named Sally Brink, who was sent to NXIVM by a friend, signed up for a class that claimed it could help her grow and succeed as an entrepreneur. As she descended deeper into the trenches, the emotional abuse became more and more apparent. Because when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, NXIVM leaders accused her of purposely getting cancer as a ploy to get more attention from her husband. But when she raised money for her treatment online, the leaders tried to convince her that the moral choice was to die, rather than waste the money to treat her illness. This is probably one of the most disturbing things that they did in NXIVM, and that was when so-called doctors performed fright studies on members, which were really illegal medical experiments on members of NXIVM.
And they sound really upsetting.
Now, what they would actually do is insane. They would take you, sit you down, and hook you up to an EEG machine, which monitors brainwaves. And then they would force you to watch horrific scenes of violence and murder.
And what's the point? Why? They just wanted to torture people. They just wanted to see people scared.
And this whole idea that, somehow this can be a healing thing is just absolutely crazy.
Whatever.
But over time, the teachings and philosophies in NXIVM became more extreme and misogynistic, laying the groundwork for DOS, which stands for dominant over submissive, which ends up being the secret cult that's running within NXIVM. Members were taught that men had more primitive impulses and had a biological need to have multiple partners and to have as many children as possible. Therefore, men were polygamous. On the other hand, women were nurturers who desired to be with one mate and to care for him and her children. So women were expected to be monogamous. Women were also taught that it was their duty to have children and to care for those children. And according to Key's teaching, the logical result is that women will leave the workforce and therefore don't actually deserve to be paid as much as men for equal work.
And can you imagine being a woman and joining this and being like, yeah, that sounds about right. Where do I sign?
In later years, these teachings morphed into a hierarchy system based on men having higher moral character than women, and women being flaky and erratic and in need of guidance and validation by men.
I just think it's stupid in general to make these huge generalizations of people that all men are like this and all women are like this. Like, no, it's not. We see clearly everyone comes so differently in different lifestyles and has nothing to do with your gender at the end of the day, really.
What's crazy and twisted about all of this is that he took all of these misogynistic concepts, wrapped them up and packaged them into ideas of female empowerment and feminism.
Yeah, he basically told them, like, you're a bunch of weak-minded women and you need my help to get your mind straight and really be successful in this life. Because if not, you're just like floating around as a little poor woman.
One of his strategies was his insistence to always have women in leadership positions at NXIVM. He told people he believed women made better leaders. In reality, he likely thought women would be easier to control than men and that women in positions of power could more easily recruit other women. So during the first 5 years that NXIVM was around, it grew exponentially. The organization amassed over 3,700 regular participants, including notable executives, entrepreneurs, socialites, and actors. Of particular note were Mexico's president's daughter, Ana Cristina Fox, as well as Claire and Sarah Bronfman, who are heiresses to the Seagram liquor fortune. The Bronfman family ended up being one of the biggest financiers of NXIVM and is still in control of NXIVM today. But eventually, NXIVM caught the attention of Rick Allen Ross, a cult investigator, and in the early 2000s, he obtained copies of NXIVM's manual. Participating members were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. When excerpts from the manual were published on Ross's website, along with a professional assessment from a psychiatrist who labeled it, quote unquote, expensive brainwashing, NXIVM responded by suing the Ross Institute and the member who leaked the manual for copyright infringement. While the cases were eventually dismissed, they sent a powerful message of swift retaliation to anyone who defied NXIVM. The tentacles of NXIVM reached beyond a single organization. Various societies for women and men associated with NXIVM were developed to identify new recruits, and even an international chain of childcare centers called the Rainbow Cultural Garden was established in 2006. And this program claims that it can teach children as young as 2 years old up to 7 languages simultaneously. But in reality, according to cult expert Rick Allen Ross, he said that it has nothing to do with teaching languages to children. It's about indoctrinating children to be like Keith Raniere. So this is right around the time when Smallville actresses Kristen Crook and Allison Mack were recruited in 2010. Kristen left the group in 2013, but Allison became a confirmed recruiter and became a significant player in obviously the darker that surrounds NXIVM.
Significant.
She quickly rose the ranks to second in command for her role as a high-level recruiter. So that leads us to DOS, or Dominus Obsequious Sororium, which is a Latin phrase translated to master over slave women. DOS was first revealed by the New York Times in 2017, thanks to a person, an ex-employee of NXIVM, that actually broke the story. But this was the first time that the world really got a look into what was actually happening inside of NXIVM, and that NXIVM consisted of a hierarchy of female slaves and male masters. Basically, this was a sick and twisted secret sisterhood that was rooted in the misogynistic teachings of NXIVM. And what they did was they would subtly implant ideas that, women are subservient to men, and women that joined were groomed and manipulated into engaging into acts with Keith Raniere. And through her work as a recruiter for NXIVM, Allison Mack targeted women who could later be brought into DOS, and she was paid to do so. Allison was an integral part of the early practices of the Secret Sisterhood, and she engineered a branding process that was part of the initiation. And the women were branded with this symbol that when you flip it to the side is a KR. And then when you look at it just straight on is an AM.
And they branded them with that without even telling them what it is. And this is something that you're going to have on your body forever. Like you can never get it removed.
You can't really cover this up either with the tattoo even.
And it's his name. Can you imagine as a victim?
Yeah.
Oh, how sick. It's hard to imagine why you would want to stay if you saw these people being branded. Like, why would you stay?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of them just felt like they really did have no other choice. They had all this blackmail. They've already invested all into it, and they've spent a lot of time. And yeah.
They called it collateral. Really in order to be initiated into this,
you had to have some collateral.
DOS.
Yeah.
You got to give us something. Not only that, Allison Mack and Keith Raniere were planning an elaborate dungeon with cages and a variety of BDSM toys in the basement of the main DOS building. But the plan was shut down when the federal investigations into NXIVM started to ramp up. Now, Allison Mack's and Keith Raniere's scheme really started to crumble when a Canadian actress named Sarah Edmondson went public with her harrowing experience with the Secret Sisterhood. Edmondson was recruited in 2005 and didn't leave the cult until 2017. And during that time, she rose through the ranks. She even started a Canadian section of NXIVM and collected commission from the members who were recruited there. But once she was recruited into DOS, it all started to unravel, and she began to see NXIVM for the criminal organization it really was. Keith propagated the idea that having sex with him was the closest a woman could get to an enlightenment. Wow.
God.
What remains of the Secret Sisterhood is being run by actress Nikki Klein, who married Allison Mack in 2017. Under her rule, women are still subjected to drills and are still physically punished if they fall out of line.
How can it be possible that this can still run right now?
Because they're hiding it. They're hiding it under these different layers of things. And
we're just a sorority.
Right. So now let's talk about the downfall of NXIVM, which, NXIVM is not really gone even now, but at least the downfall of Keith Raniere. So after the branding went public in the New York Times story, that's when the FBI got involved and started doing an investigation into NXIVM. So in late 2017, Keith Raniere and his closest confidants fled to Mexico, but their plans were canceled when Mexican authorities arrived at their door in March of 2018. He was arrested and then brought back to the United States for indictment, and Allison Mack was arrested the following month. And one by one, high-ranking members and leaders in NXIVM were arrested and charged. Allison Mack, the highest profile person involved in the case, pled guilty on April 8th to 1 count of racketeering conspiracy and 1 count of racketeering. Now, Keith Raniere's trial lasted 7 weeks, but on June 19, 2019, Keith Raniere was found guilty on all counts, and the list of federal crimes included trafficking of children and conspiracy to commit forced labor. NXIVM is still around. It's in full-out war mode and has moved to Brooklyn. There's also some members of NXIVM that are in Mexico now, because NXIVM was like all over the world. It got global at one point, but obviously after all this went down, a lot of people left, but there's still a lot of people. They still believe in Keith, and they are totally still drinking the
hooked,
Kool-Aid. Yeah.
It's just crazy to think about how many women, all of these women, had recruited into it, and how, those women recruited other women, and how it just got spread. And a lot of them didn't realize they were bringing their friends and family into such a bad situation. And this is, again, why you got to stand up and look for your own information, not just believe anything that anyone's telling you or some narrative, because you'll end up falling for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, when it first broke, I remember it was on the news and stuff, but it's kind of just trickled off. I'm sure a lot of people kind of forgot about it or never had heard of it and no idea.
That is it for us today. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the Mile Higher podcast. Until next time, stay safe
and stay woke.